want to thank you first and foremost for coming on the platform. I really appreciate you taking out the time to come by and talk about some of the great work that you have been doing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh yeah, it's definitely an honor. For the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know who you are and definitely where you're from?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Lieberman. I'm a filmmaker in New York City. I've been primarily making documentary films. I've made three films to date. The latest, most recent one is called Bella, about Congresswoman Bella Abzug. My previous film was about the great Nina Simone, the singer and civil rights activist. That film is called The Amazing Nina Simone, named after one of her first albums. And my first film was called Reemerging the Jews of Nigeria, which is about the Igbo people of Nigeria, and specifically a select group of them who are practicing Judaism, unbeknownst to a lot of the rest of the world. Um, and in addition to films, I'm also a journalist and I've worked for CNN and CBS News and New York Post. So I've sort of had a varied career in journalism and in entertainment.
Wow, wow, that's very inspiring. That's very inspiring. Now I can ask you this: when did you kind of develop a passion for filmmaking and journalism? Is that something you aspired to do when you were younger, or you kind of got into it later in life?
Yeah, as a kid, I was always really fascinated with media and watched a lot of television and somehow sort of studied a lot of television news. I was definitely very curious about that world and wanted to be part of it in some respect. I got my first video camera when I was 13 and started experimenting and filming a lot of different things. Made a short film in high school, filmed a lot of bar mitzvahs and weddings as kind of like a side gig just to make some money and improve my skills. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning. I did a lot of editing on VCRs because that was the technology that was available to me, but I made it work.
Wow, that's real cool. That's a good idea, for a young person to, have that tenacity and that creativeness to utilize, your passion to make a couple extra dollars on the side, and you still doing it. Look how far it have brought you worldwide.
That's what
Yeah.
I sort of tell a lot of young filmmakers is, do experiment as much as you can and don't wait for anyone to tell you that you can do it or you have the permission or the money. Just start experimenting and see how things go and see what you can create.
Definitely, definitely. Now you had mentioned working for CNN. If you could talk about that, how did you end up working for them? What was that experience like? Cause CNN is like probably one of the most recognized news stations on earth.
Yeah, I actually had two different experiences with CNN. The first was in 1999. I applied to be an intern at the network when it was still mainly based in Atlanta, and New York was kind of a smaller bureau, basically. But I had met a producer at a radio and television conference, so I really admired what she was doing. Rose Arce is her name, and her and correspondent Maria Inihosa were covering a lot of um, news and events from New York City that focused on social justice and civil rights. They covered a lot of broad news topics in addition to that, but there definitely seemed to be a feeling that they were covering issues of injustice from police abuse and topics like that. Things that I really wanted to also kind of invest my time and energy into. So I worked with them for a few months over 99 and 2000 and was also there for the uh, Y2K when the millennium turned over and had a press pass in Times Square and really kind of got to see a lot of things up close as a 21-year-old and really engaged with wanting to be in that world. More recently, I got hired on as a senior producer at CNN Plus, which was their entry into the streaming world, and was kind of a short-lived project. but I spent about 5 months working for them and produced a film for their documentary unit called Taking on Taylor Swift, which was about two songwriters who had sued Taylor Swift for copyright infringement over the song Shake It Off. And we used that case to really dive into why there were so many copyright infringement cases happening in the music industry at this time, and really kind of delved into that whole world and how is it possible to really have original music these days.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a interesting subject because you hear it all the time. You hear musicians or up and coming musicians or people say they stole my song or they didn't pay me or I wrote that song, and you never know. Sometimes it could be true, and sometimes maybe it could be a coincidence. People in the same era, same time, thinking about the same thing. So.
True.
Yeah, yeah. Now I wanted to ask you about this. I was checking out your profile on Wiki. I don't know how true it is, but I guess you had some involvement in the coverage with the young man from Africa. He was a student, I believe, in New York, and he got killed by the police.
Yes, Amadou Diallo. That's what I was referring to when I was talking about my interning with Rose Arce and Maria Nahosa. They were covering that story quite closely, and that was a big turning point in holding the police accountable, the NYPD accountable. A lot of people really took to the streets to protest that unjust killing, and really tried to hold the police accountable for that. And there were a few other cases that also were around that time that really showed how there needed to be more police oversight, because things like that were happening, and really to the detriment of the city and to its population.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I remember that story. I was a lot younger, but I say that to say I don't know if I told you I'm currently in Ghana. So a lot of Africans they have this dream to come over to America, and sometimes they don't see the other side of it. And then I could ask you this: what are your thoughts on the current, I guess, situation with holding police accountable and police brutality since then? That was 1999. You had George Floyd, and I think a young lady recently, she got killed by the police. She called 911, and things just went wrong.
Yeah, it seems to be an ongoing issue. I was very involved in protesting during the George Floyd protests, and felt it really was a pivotal moment in terms of holding all police departments accountable, because clearly the issue had gone to such a degree that people were losing faith in the police, and people wanted to defund the police in a lot of cities because of these issues that were happening, but also this idea that the police were just approaching situations incorrectly, that they were funded to a large degree, but they were using that funding to militarize and to take a very aggressive stance against the communities that they were policing. And there were a lot of people like myself and others included who felt like there were ways to go about policing that were more community oriented, placing officers in the community to get to know the members of the community and be able to de-escalate situations as opposed to escalate them, and to bring in people who have training to deal with people who have mental illness or suffering a mental break. And that a lot of these situations of extreme violence were happening when they could have been avoided, and they could have been de-escalated by trained professionals. And so that obviously continues to be a significant factor, significant issue. And as you point out, just last week or 2 weeks ago, a woman was killed in her own home, and could have been completely avoided. And the police should have training to avoid those situations and avoid using violence. And so those stories are still very, very important, and change is still needed.